back to The Reason We Learn. I'm Deb Philman, mom, homeschooler, educator. So earlier today, somebody in my locals community asked me to explain how unions work because she's not been a teacher, she doesn't have kids, and she's hearing all these things about unions. She says, I don't really understand how they work, what they're about. Can you just do a quick primer on like how it all works? So I thought, sure, I'll do that. And then as I was researching it, I realized, a lot of things I say about the unions in terms of how they work is a little outdated. So I also need to make a couple of corrections to things that I have said in the past. So I will get to that. But I first want to put it out there right up front that I make no secret on this channel of being 100% opposed to teachers' unions, to their very existence. I make no secret of the reason why either. I think they're undemocratic. I think they allow for collective bargaining for public sector workers with our elected officials without us being present. We, the taxpayers, are not present. Now, that's not to say the teachers are not taxpayers. Of course they are. Or that union reps are not taxpayers. Of course they are. But it's a little different when your job, your compensation comes from taxpayers who are not in your profession. They don't literally have a seat at the table. And you're going to work directly with the politicians who extract the money from us to pay you and leave us out of the equation. I think that's undemocratic. It is far too easy for it to become a giant lobby for the politicians who give you what you want. I mean, there's no way it would work out otherwise. And that is how we've ended up with teachers unions that pretty much give only to one party. I shouldn't say pretty much, they do 100% of the time. Whether all their members would agree or not, it's kind of irrelevant. The money they give to political action goes to one party and only one party. And that traditionally has been because Republicans have been, if not completely opposed to teacher unions and wanting them to be outlawed, they have been, they've not wanted to let them have as much power as they have. And in many states run by Republicans, they've tried to limit their power and limit their ability to exist. Interestingly enough, the biggest opponent of public sector unions was Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and he's quite possibly the most socialistic president we've ever had. So I find that interesting. And he was against it for the same reason I am, that it's undemocratic and it cuts the taxpayers out of the bargain at the bargaining table. And of course, it can lead to corruption, which it has. So that's my position. If you disagree with that, then, it's not that you'll get nothing out of the rest of this video. It's just that we're probably not going to agree on a lot of the opinions that I'm going to express as I'm explaining the technicalities of how they work. And this is just a primer. I'm sure there are going to be things people would find wrong and say, well, you didn't go into this and you forgot to mention that. I'm not going to mention everything. Definitely not. I'm just going to cover the key points that you need to know about unions. Okay, first of all, you need to know that unions are not equally strong in every state. They're not even present in every state. I think there are 2 or 3 states where they're just not even legal, that collective bargaining is. And that's not to say that associations of teachers don't exist, but it's just that they are not directly collectively bargaining with the state for their contracts. They are not the ones who go in and, they don't strike. They don't do things like that. They have an association. Maybe they can, get certain benefits less expensively. They do lobby. They lobby, for better pay and so forth. But it's not that the state has to go to them to negotiate the contracts. It doesn't work like that. Okay, so I pulled this article I found today when I was doing my research by somebody in New York who wrote, "The teachers union has become a public menace opinion." And I am including this in this whole discussion because I want you to hear from someone who is unabashedly pro-union, explaining why he's frustrated with the union right now. So I have to qualify that this is somebody who's openly pro-union in general, pro-public sector union specifically, pro-teachers union specifically, but even he is very frustrated right now. Now, as I go through this, I'm going to explain to you and to him, if he ever sees this, that I think a lot of the problems he's highlighting are a function of the fact that it is a public sector union, but we'll get to that. All right, he says, "I am a proud card-carrying member of the Columbia Postdoctoral Workers Union." Did you know that such a thing existed? Postdoctoral Workers Union? Under the umbrella of the United Auto Workers. I find that fascinating. He's a postdoctoral research scientist, Department of Environmental Health Sciences at Columbia University, and his union is under the umbrella of the United Auto Workers Union. I value public school education, and my children are enrolled in public school in New York City, but I'm running out of patience with the public school teachers and their stubborn refusal to return to normal working hours and in-person teaching. Across the country, this attitude is hurting working mothers as well as other union workers. It is damaging the public case of both public education and the need for a strong union in the workplace. Most importantly, it's causing significant damage to the well-being of children, particularly the underprivileged. Teachers' unions have insisted that teachers can work online without disrupting key supply chains, as a New Jersey teachers union put it. Unlike truckers, grocery store workers, nurses, and lab scientists who have to go to a workplace to get the work done, teachers can get the job done online, so why push them towards the in-person class? But this claim demands pushback. Is it really true that teachers are effective online? What does remote education look like in real life? 2 20-minute online sessions have been scheduled in the entire school day for my 3-year-old son. Now, I'm sorry, I have to ask why his 3-year-old son is in school, but that's a whole separate question. Irrespective of how great the teacher is, she is kind and doing the best she can, or how brilliantly designed the curriculum is, it can never come close to the in-person 6-hour school experience, and I'm going to gather that curriculum's not so brilliantly designed either. After all, if remote learning were an acceptable alternative, why would we invest in in-person public education at all? Given the failure of remote education to care for the intellectual, emotional, and physical health of children, teachers are actually disrupting the key supply chain that creates a well-rounded child thriving in society. Some would say, and if you listened to my video earlier about the dumbing us down chapter, you might just cross off the child part, okay, in a well-rounded society. Except I don't know what well-rounded means in this context. Things are far worse for children with disabilities, children with abusive guardians, and those born poor. Children from poverty-stricken homes aren't just falling even further behind affluent ones in terms of education, though. 30 million children benefit from the National School Lunch Program, which offers free or reduced meals to school children. 2/3 of them pay nothing at all due to the circumstances of their families. Without in-person teaching, those children are home without those crucial meals at a time when many parents have lost their jobs due to the pandemic. 4 in 10 Black and Latino families are facing food insecurity, researchers found. The teachers' unions resisting return to school are disrupting the food supply chain that many lower-income children desperately rely on. The recalcitrance is also furthering food insecurity in another way. While teachers can work online for the comfort of their homes, what about the parent of a remote school child who has to stay home and forgo pay when absent from the workplace? The effect that the refusal to open schools has had on working parents is immeasurable and is a burden borne disproportionately by working class people, people of color, and especially women. Recent data shows women leaving the workforce at 4 times the rate of men. A number of experts chalk up to increased burden of having children home from school. There you see teachers striking. And then he goes into some stuff about the virus. And he says, millions of workers have gone to the workplace. He says, so why should teachers unions get a pass when healthcare professionals, researchers, blah, blah, have gone back to work? And there's all kinds of evidence that they're safe. And here he says, I'm happy to campaign for hazard pay for teachers and investment in safer school buildings. Investment, keyword. The teachers and my kids surely deserve it. Not the teachers. But first, teachers must get back to work and show some long overdue solidarity with other working class union workers and some care for the children whose education, whose lives they are responsible for. Okay, so everything he says here about the role the schools serve is factually correct. Parents depend on these schools for childcare. Apparently, this gentleman is no exception. His son is 3. Typically, kindergarten is 7. So we're talking about a preschooler. Okay? Then, it is true that working single parents, minorities, even dual income, working class families, whatever, depend more on the schools for their child care than people of middle class and upper middle class and so forth. So when they have to stay home because the teacher's not there, even if there is remote learning, they are forgoing income. I have said that on this channel before. So there are practical reasons that parents depend on the schools. I've also said on this channel that that's the answer to your question about what happened to discipline and why are the schools doing all these things? Because they've promised the parents they would. We'll feed your kids. We'll take care of them. We'll be their child care. You can go to work and get a job and all these things. So they've taken all this on and now they're not showing up. And so he's not incorrect. They've made us dependent on these schools. But I think the part he's missing is that's also exactly why they're so powerful. So if a union's role is to be strong, they don't have a union. They don't form a union so they can be weak. They can be easily pushed around. If it's to be strong, then they have succeeded fabulously at their mission. Because in making parents so dependent on the schools for all these things and on the teachers to provide them in those buildings, because they can't just show up to empty buildings, have to be adults there, warm bodies to do all these things, make sure the food, make sure the teaching, all that. They have the power because you're so dependent. That's where the power comes from. Okay. Listen to him negotiate. I'll lobby for hazard pay, and I'm happy to talk about making the building safer, as if that's really their concern. And this is after going through his little speech or his bit down here where he acknowledges that it's safer, and even Dr. Fauci says it's pretty safer, and the new variants are likely covered by the vaccine, and all the things that he says. And, he's accurate. He's accurate. But he seems to miss, because he's so focused. He's a member of a union himself. He's so focused on that there's this need. We have to have this need to collectively bargain. And, this is where you get paid more and all this. I wonder if he's ever stopped to think that maybe we don't need this. It seems to be this foregone conclusion. The teachers are going to be treated so poorly if they don't collectively bargain, but that isn't really true. While it is true that they tend to get paid more in the states where they exist as a bottom line, dollar for dollar, they also live in states that have, higher costs of living than the states where the teachers are not unionized. They also tend, not across the board, but they tend to have less autonomy in the classroom, and they're micromanaged. Now, what am I talking about micromanaged? Well, they ask to be. This is an OEA bargaining blueprint for California, just to give you an idea. This thing is how many pages? It weighs 7 pages long and includes all kinds of little details for what will go into the contract, little tiny, little small things that the teachers union is now telling the state, these will be included in our contract. Extra duty compensation, complete class sets of all textbooks and other necessary materials, increase opportunities for differentiated PD to address the varied skills, needs, interest levels of members. It's so far beyond our salary and our benefits, and what disciplinary action will be taken if something goes wrong or whatever. It is so detailed. All specific contract language defining nature of advisory periods, attendance, grading, curriculum. Replace third week with second week of school. 3 50-minute planning periods. 2 will be staffed. Preparation for elementary teachers. I was an elementary teacher. This is just wastes of time. But all of this is what gets included in their collective bargaining, as if teachers individually can't negotiate with the school where they want to go get a job and say, well, I'm going to need this, this, and this to be, to do this job. And then they wonder why people look upon them like factory workers and treat them as they're just like the Borg. They're not individuals. They don't have a lot of individual autonomy in the classroom for discipline, etc. Well, I don't notice a whole lot in here. It's employee rights and all kinds of just cause, and you can't fire me and all these things. Special ed class sizes, like don't make the class bigger than this. All kinds of things, resource specialists, substitute teachers, compensation, payroll, summer school. But you know what's missing? How much autonomy they can have over designing their own lessons, choosing their own curriculum, disciplining kids in their classroom. They don't have those things. They don't have that. That's not in here. So they're not ever arguing for that. It's always money and less work. Money, less work, money, more benefits, money, someone else doing jobs other than us. Often people are not in the union, etc. So it's really all about the teachers and not about the students. There's nothing in there that I saw that was specific to how to help the students do better. And so the more you do that, and the more you collectively bargain that those are your priorities, the more distance you put between yourself and the parents, yourself and the students, in terms of anyone really believing that you care. You may care deeply, but it's hard to perceive that because you're spending almost all your time and your money, by the way, as a union, focusing not on how can I do my job better, how can I be permitted and enabled to do my job better serving the children, and how can I make my job easier for myself and my colleagues? How can I get more out of it financially for myself? It's as if they feel like they're working in this dangerous, factory. So that's part of why I think people just start to see them that way. It's not how professionals behave. Professionals negotiate individually what their contract's going to be. If they don't like it, they go somewhere else. And this is part of the problem with this giant public school system run by the government where there isn't school choice, there's one place to go. You want to be a teacher, you're going to work in that district, you're going to work in that state, you're going to work for the government. The government is your employer, not the parents, not the kids, not even that individual school. It's the government. So you're so removed from the delivery of your service. But people love to say, well, I'm going to get paid more. I'm going to get paid more. Now this I pulled up. This is a course you can take online to teach you about the California teachers unions. I pulled this because they are one of the biggest, most powerful unions in the country. And this, describes, the functions of the unions and so forth and how they work. But I did want to go over something they point out here. There's a great sound and fury in education reform discussions about whether unions are good or bad for public education. Most old hands in the education arena, though not all, view this as a false dichotomy. Unions are good. There's no question that states with strong unions, such as California, tend to pay teachers more than those with weaker unions. Teachers in strong union states also generally have more generous healthcare benefits. It's not always about the money. If money made the world go round in terms of how happy you are at your job, then most teachers, considering how many months they work, how much vacation they get, how many days off, how, all these things that they have, for similarly educated private sector workers. So somebody with a bachelor's degree, possibly master's degree, working in the private sector, same number of years, is not making as much money. I think teachers have this illusion that they are. If you went to college, grad school, and straight into teaching, you really don't know. And I've done both, so I do know. And I can tell you that I would have made more had I gotten that job that I wanted in the public school my second year. I would have made more than I made in the private sector job working in a financial services company in HR with the same degrees. And I was working weekends, I was working crazy hours for that company, etc. So it's actually false that they're so underpaid. You have to ask yourself, compared to what? Compared to whom? Compared to other teachers in private schools? No, definitely not. And yet, again, those jobs are filled. They're not going wanting. And then this says unions are bad. Among critics of unionism in education, one vocal figure is Terry Moe, argues that unions' interests are poorly aligned with those of students and taxpayers. I would argue the same. In California, the most potent voice is probably that of Mac Antonucci. At the local level, critics such as Moe argue that negotiations between districts and unions are structurally out of balance. The union's power to call a strike is unmatched by any equivalent power from the district side. Districts cannot lawfully dismiss the striking teachers and hire replacements, et cetera, et cetera. So you decide if you think that's good or bad or what. I personally think it's terrible. I don't think it's even a discussion. If you have that much power over people, as this first man described, it's like, oh, we need them for this and we need them for that and we need them for the other, and they feed and they do all the things. If you've set people up to be that dependent on you over decades, and then you turn around and go, we don't feel like going back to work because we're scared, or we're, whatever, politics, we want more money, et cetera. Or we're going to pretend we need or want more money for these schools because when you give it to us, we're going to turn around and give it back to you. And then we know you're going to take care of us forever and ever. And no one's going to bust this union or, make us work hard. And maybe we can work virtually forever. Who knows what it is they want. But the point is, they can do these things because they have that power, because people are so dependent. And the same people don't have a means of stopping them. They can't just say you're all fired. They can't. They literally can't. That's how big it is. So the only recourse people have is to leave. Parents bring their kids out, homeschool, go to a private school, whatever. Obviously, people want school choice. That would be one way around it, except guess who uses their considerable sums of money and dues to fight school choice? Unions. That way they just keep you, they hold you captive, and it will be less transparent, that people are frustrated and don't want to be there. So, we talk about raising funds for political action, etc. So now I had mentioned in a video that paying union fees was mandatory, but it's actually not anymore. In 2018, after decades of fierce debate, the U.S. Supreme Court eliminated this obligation. It ruled in the Janus decision that union fees are a form of speech protected by the First Amendment, and that mandatory fair share fees for representation in collective bargaining are an unconstitutional form of compelled speech. This was a major reversal with big implications for the education system. So basically, there had been an order before saying that that people who weren't in the union, like you couldn't be forced to be in it, but you'd have to pay agency fees. In other words, even if you weren't paying full dues and getting the full benefits, you were effectively benefiting, because the salary was going to be the salary, from collective bargaining on your behalf, even though you didn't ask for it. So you should pay an agency fee. And that was, allowed. Not all states supported the agency shop approach. Okay. It was allowed. That was the deal, but it didn't mean they did it. And so then there were other cases, etc. So then that case, the Janus case, said, no, you can't do that anymore. You can't force people to pay you agency fees. They've said they don't want to be in the union. They can't. Now, some people have asked me, does this mean you have to join the union if you're in a state like California? And the short answer is no, not literally. But I will say that the vast majority of teachers who apply for jobs do, probably because the vast majority of them think it's a good idea. They want to. They're, persuaded with all these glitzy marketing materials that it's really good for them and they're going to get a lot of benefit out of it. There's heavy social pressure to do it. There's almost no support for not doing it. You will likely be the only person you meet in your school who doesn't do it if you don't, and so on. So it's one of those, no, not in the strictest sense of the law. You don't have to, but just letting you know. It's one of those, like, I was compelled. When I was in Illinois, I was compelled to join. They just made it very clear to me that I would not get paid at the school if I did not sign on the dotted line and join the union. Now, looking back on it now, I realize that they shouldn't have done that. It was actually technically illegal that they did that to me. But they get away with it because most people don't know their rights and they don't know what's up, and they see that everyone else is doing it and they think it's true. I think you have to. So as a practical matter, yes, you do. Legally, no, you don't. But fat lot of good that does, right? I don't know if this explains anything more about unions, but as I said, I'm against them. I think they're undemocratic. I think they do a great job of lobbying for teachers whose number one purpose in life is to get paid more and have all kinds of little minutia, dealt with on their behalf. But if you are the kind of person who just wants to be left alone to be a good teacher and come up with your own lessons and discipline your class the way you want, and maybe be able to go to your administrator and talk directly to them and say, I need more power in my classroom and I need you to help me out, without having to have somebody come along and intercede on your behalf like you're 5 years old, then, whatever. I mean, that's going to determine whether you think the unions are good or bad, what kind of person you are. Just how it is. I'm the kind of person, I don't want that. I want to negotiate directly with my employer. And if I don't like how they treat me, I'm going to leave. So I was probably better suited for private school. Anyway, I hope this has been helpful in some way, shape, or form. I think the unions should be illegal, the teachers union. They never will be, likely, but we can make them a lot less powerful if we are not dependent on the schools they control. Because then we won't care what the politicians they control, or who control them, or I don't know, whoever's controlling this week. I think the unions are controlling the politicians, but we won't be as dependent on those politicians if our kids are not in the school. We can vote based on policy, not based on how likely the teachers are to strike if we vote the wrong way. So I hope this was useful. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, share the video, etc. And that's the video. Thanks.